So I wanted to make this video to explain what moral bias is. It's an idea I came up with based on the child developmental research I do, and I think it helps explain quite a bit and why we as humans fail to be objective when we study humans. People typically blame cognitive bias. People are attached to their own ideas. I want to take it a level further. I want to call it moral bias. So moral bias is when a moral ideal seems so obvious to a person and so integral to their survival that objectivity is shut down. It's not just that they fancy a particular idea. They've attached morality to a particular idea. I noticed this when doing my child developmental research. So the thing that tipped me off about it was a study done about children's sleep patterns and misbehavior. And so there was a study, I've seen it floating around a couple times, that scientists correlated children's quote-unquote misbehavior with less sleep at night. Now, the natural conclusion of many, not all for sure, but many, is that you should get the child to go to bed early so that they don't misbehave, because that's the ideal, right? Is a calm child who goes to bed on time. Now, my child developmental research documents the times that children misbehave. I document their age-related stages. It's times that they quote-unquote act up. They become more aggressive, whinier, more in your face. Some might call more annoying. But it's per the theory of many, is because their brain was going through an upgrade, and on the other side of all this behavior is going to be a child with an astonishing burst of new ability. And so what my research finds is that these age-related stages in which children misbehave also highly correlate with children who cannot sleep at night very well. They tend to stay up late, they get up in the middle of the night, they get up early, they want you to be there. These two things are correlated. They happen at the same time naturally. So a study would find that. It would find that times when children are acting up at night, they are also getting less sleep. Because I argue that these brain upgrades are probably happening during sleep. Some type of programming is being released in their mind. So, a study would find that they correlate. But there's very little you can do about it. And so I realized our moral bias is in the way. The moral ideal, in this case, in the way, is the idea of a calm child. That parents want this. They're gravitated toward it. That's the ideal that they want. And they think that that's how life should go and that they can control it. And I'm saying that this moral ideal is mythological. The idea of a calm child at all times, like, we need to abandon this idea. The moral ideal itself is in the way. It's a false moral ideal. And so I just started to think about this idea of moral bias, that it clouds our objectivity. We can't see what is in front of us because we have this idea of what should be. It explains so much. I mean, it explains political philosophies that are so caught up in their utopian ideal that they can't see the damage they're doing. It explains religion, which for centuries has claimed that the problem is not their moral ideal. Their moral ideal is holy. All the bad stuff that happens in the name of religion is bad people. It explains something like COVID narrative. They feel morally righteous that social distancing, masks, all that are moral. It's integral to their survival. If you don't do it, you're a very bad person and you're going to kill people. Moral bias typically is based in a do or die type thinking. More on the die part. Very, very bad things will happen if you don't do these things that they have decided is moral, and they've decided it's so integral to success, they will not update their thinking. They will not update their moral ideal. Now, this is religion, this is communism, this is COVID narrative. And this is behaviorism in parenting. Parents so strongly believe that they can mold their child to be some ideal. Academic, going to bed early, athletic, whatever it is. And so I started to notice that this happens in so many places, and I started to document the traits of it. Because it follows a very, very predictable pattern. It is always a attempt to fix something that is perceived as being broken. It's an attempt to bring order to what is perceived as disorder. A child staying up late at night. A disease running rampant through humanity. Sinners. Is always rooted in a very pessimistic, anxiety-ridden view of human nature itself. So the moral ideal is developed, which is very seemingly heroic. Mask up. Superheroes wear masks. Christians flatter themselves as benevolent heroes here to bring joy to people. Communists, they all see themselves as very heroic, and that it's necessary for survival. And so they're operating on making something bad be good. And they have no sense of what actually is good or how to get it. And so as they're trying to make something bad be good, the assumption is that if people are not succeeding, it's because they're not committed. They're just not disciplined enough. There isn't enough money. There's not enough resources. It's your fault. This happens over and over and over. It happens in health and medicine. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and very clearly the message was, if you're overweight, you're not exercising enough. Now, this defies all weight loss principles up until about 1970. People were not overweight before that, and they weren't out running marathons. The most exercise my grandmother got was probably vacuuming. And yet, something obviously terrible happened, and yet you're at fault. You're not exercising enough. You're eating too much. The blame is put on the person. So, yeah, it's a predictable cycle. Some other things are, if it does cause damage, it's ignored. It's absolutely horrific in like communism. We know it killed millions upon millions, and they don't see it. With COVID narrative, tens of thousands of businesses shut down. People were sent into despair, committed suicide, and the people cannot see it because the moral ideal shines that brightly in their mind. They don't care. And I argue that this is something that's built into the human psyche that can be easily exploited. Because if you're operating on fear, whatever is causing that fear is the only thing you can see. If you were being hung over a cliff, it is the one and only thing you would see. Your attention is caught and you're focused. That other people are actually being kicked off the cliff is not of your concern at the moment. And so moral bias tends to operate in crisis mode. All you have to do is keep the crisis going. I argue that this is a byproduct of humans designed to live out in the wilderness. We're still designed for that. Put into civilization. Because in the wilderness, this would be of benefit. If you were caught and you're in fear and all your attention was focused on it, that would be a good thing. Now, when you come into civilization, this becomes a bad thing because all sorts of things happen. First of all, you no longer, all that fear, you don't need it as much anymore. And I think some humans crave it. Like, they seem to like the fear. Like, COVID narrative, it seemed like they seemed to be in like a Freddy Krueger movie or something. They were like, or a zombie movie, probably more appropriate, that they were running from it and they were like excited about it. So this fear like almost needs an outlet. But the other thing is, if you are in civilization and there is a threat that comes, you can't do as much about it. Let's say you decided to civilize right in Florida. Or let's do South America, that's better. And a hurricane is coming. You can't run like you can in a foraging society. You have a lot of stuff you want to protect. And so that's why I argue they developed this idea that, well, we'll offer child sacrifices to appease the gods. It's a stupid solution. But I'm arguing that in such a situation where humans have no good method to deal with it, they come up with really stupid solutions. And it just is it's just how it is. All humans will fall to it, I argue. All humans have this trait in their psyche that lends toward moral bias. And so it ends up rewarding psychopathic people, because the psychopaths are willing to go offer children to be killed. They don't care. They're trying to fight for a particular thing. They're trying, typically land, typically trying to stake out a particular place and keep it. And it sent a message to all those people saying, hey, this was a bad idea. Civilization itself was a bad idea. We should be running. We should be getting out of here. Basically, the psychopaths sent a message to them: stop complaining or I'm going to kill your children. And so my argument is that this has been with us for thousands of years. And I argue it's a product of, it's a trait in the human psyche that's extremely adaptive if we're out in the wilderness, and becomes highly maladaptive when we civilize, unless we can identify it and manage it. Yeah, and so now people have figured out, opportunists have figured out how to exploit it. All you gotta do is keep the fear party going. And I think every generation that hits it is naive. They're not aware of it, and they get hit with their first crisis, and they're emotionally caught. Oh my goodness. There's war, and there's disease, and there's all sorts of bad stuff in the world. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? I've been living in my bubble this whole time, going to school on my school bus, and now it's the real world. We have to do something, and every generation falls for it. Tremendous good can be had by leaving moral bias. If you have this idea of things should be, you're almost constantly irritated. There's a lot of shoulds. The fact that your house should stand upright is a should. If a tornado comes, that would be catastrophic for you. Now, out in foraging societies, it's not. They laugh at it. They think it's funny. They band together and build a new house. So, something as simple as taking children to a restaurant. If you leave this idea of what should be, I bet you'll find you deal with things better. They should sit still. They should be quiet. They should wait until dinner is done to go to the bathroom. There's if you just think about it on your next trip out, I bet you'll see some of the fundamentals and how it can help you psychologically. So I describe this idea at my website, Ex-Objectivist.com. My book is going to be The Moral Bias of Objectivism. And I explain there what objectivism is, how it follows the traits of moral bias, because Ayn Rand is very crisis mode. You need her philosophy, because if you don't have a philosophy, your choices could lead to life or death. She develops it based on a very pessimistic view of emotions. Your emotions could be hedonistic and sadistic. You need her civilizing, heroic ethics. And if you don't live up to it, it's your fault. It is moral bias. Objectivism is a moral system. So, but you can skip around at my site. I have quick links. You can read my thoughts on objectivism, or you can go straight to the idea of moral bias, which I'm trying to somewhat replace or upgrade maybe the idea of cognitive bias. It's when a person's should prevents them from seeing the is. Thanks for watching.